On the morning of December 11th, 2023, a shocking discovery was made in a Las Vegas apartment complex when Marvin Patterson's brother visited his home. Inside, he found the bodies of 5 family members: Shanara Patterson, Marvin's wife, and their 3 children, ages 6 to 14. All were fatally shot, leaving a gruesome scene that would haunt the local community. Marvin Patterson, the father, had carried out the unthinkable, taking the lives of his wife and children before turning the gun on himself. The Las Vegas Metropolitan Police arrived shortly after, confirming the tragic deaths. The case sent shockwaves across the city and raised chilling questions about what led to this horrific event. Shanara Patterson, a loving mother and respected entrepreneur, had trusted her husband, but the tragic result of that trust would devastate her family and leave a community searching for answers. Shanara Patterson was born on December 10, 1989, in Long Beach, California. She spent her early years in California, where she grew up surrounded by family and friends who described her as loving, kind, and compassionate. As an adult, she eventually moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, where she established a life for herself and her 3 children, Keziah, Derek Jr., and Zmyra. Shanara was a dedicated mother, and her children were her top priority. She worked hard to provide them with a stable and nurturing home, making sure they were always well taken care of, both physically and emotionally. As a mother, Shanara was deeply involved in her children's lives, ensuring they were happy, healthy, and thriving. Her 3 children were her pride and joy, and she was known for always making sure they were well-dressed and presentable. Whether at school or at home, Shanara's children reflected the care and attention she devoted to them. Those who knew her often commented on her devotion to motherhood and her efforts to provide a good life for her family in Las Vegas. In her 34 years of life, Shanara had built a strong foundation as both a mother and a professional, living a life that seemed full of promise and love before it was tragically cut short. Shanara Patterson's relationship with Marvin Patterson began as a love story that seemed destined for happiness. After meeting and falling in love, the two quickly grew close, and in May 2019, they were married in a beautiful ceremony in Las Vegas. It was a moment of joy for Shanara, who expressed deep love and gratitude for Marvin. She believed she had found a partner who would stand by her and support her through life's ups and downs. In their wedding website, Shanara openly thanked God for bringing Marvin into her life, describing him as someone who appreciated and loved her and never made her feel small. The wedding was a grand affair, with Shanara's father walking her down the aisle in what would be one of his final significant acts as he passed away shortly after the wedding. Marvin and Shanara's marriage also created a blended family, as Shanara had 2 children from a previous relationship, Keziah, 14, and Derek Jr., 11, while Marvin had 2 children from his prior marriage. Despite his divorce just a month before marrying Shanara, Marvin seemed to embrace his role as a stepfather to her children. Together, they welcomed their own child, Zmyra, born in 2017, solidifying the bonds of their new family. From the outside, the Patterson family appeared to be a picture of unity and love. Marvin took on the role of a father figure to Shanara's older children, and they seemed to have a harmonious household. Family and friends saw them frequently together, whether in public or through social media posts, where they often shared happy moments, family outings, and milestones. As a couple, Marvin and Shanara projected a sense of stability and happiness. Their love story, blended family, and shared life together gave the impression that they had overcome their pasts and built something beautiful. However, beneath the surface of their seemingly perfect life, darker issues were festering that would eventually lead to a devastating and tragic end for their entire family. Shanara Patterson was a successful cosmetologist known for her expertise in braiding and wig installations, particularly among women of color. She built a strong client base through her skill and warm personality, earning a reputation as a trusted stylist in her community. As an entrepreneur, Shanara took great pride in her work, balancing her business with being a dedicated mother to her 3 children. Her personal style was reflected in her family, with her children always well-dressed and presentable, showcasing her care and attention to detail. Shanara's ability to manage both her career and family life gave the impression of a woman who had everything under control: a loving mother, a successful businesswoman, and a supportive wife. She worked hard to provide for her family while maintaining a close bond with her children. Though her life appeared stable and fulfilling, hidden issues within her family would later lead to a devastating tragedy. Marvin Patterson stepped into the role of a stepfather to Shanara's two older children, Keziah and Derek Jr., after their marriage in 2019. From the outside, he appeared to embrace this responsibility, presenting himself as a caring and involved father figure. Marvin treated the children as his own, while also raising his biological daughter, Schinara, with Shanara. Family and friends saw Marvin's involvement in the children's lives as positive, and there were no immediate signs of tension or trouble. He participated in family activities and helped create the appearance of a stable and loving blended family. However, despite this outward image, there were dark aspects to Marvin's life that would eventually surface, leading to unimaginable consequences for the family. In October 2022, the dark and deeply troubling side of Marvin Patterson came to light when he was arrested and charged with 9 felonies, all involving serious offenses against children. The charges were extensive and included 5 counts of lewd acts with a child under the age of 4, 2 counts of assault on a minor under the age of 16, 1 count of lewd conduct with a minor, and 1 count of first-degree kidnapping of a child. These allegations spanned a 9-year period from 2013 to 2022 and cast a disturbing shadow over Marvin's character, particularly given that he was living in a household with Shanara's 3 children, including her 14-year-old daughter, Keziah. The charges came as a shock to those who knew Marvin, as there had been no previous signs of criminal behavior. On the surface, he had appeared to be a loving husband and caring stepfather. However, the severity of the accusations indicated a deeply concealed, darker nature. The victims in the case were believed to be young girls who had at one point lived in or been associated with the same apartment complex as Marvin and his family. The revelation of these charges raised immediate concerns about the safety of Shanara's children, particularly Keziah, who was living under the same roof as Marvin. Following his arrest, Marvin's bail was initially set at $100,000, a figure reflecting the gravity of the crimes he was accused of. This high bail amount was intended to ensure that he remained in custody, given the serious nature of the charges and the potential danger he posed to minors. In addition to the bail amount, several strict conditions were imposed to further limit any risk to the community. Marvin was required to surrender his passport to prevent any attempts to flee the country, and he was prohibited from having any contact with minors under the age of 18, including his own children and stepchildren. However, despite the significant charges, Marvin's financial situation became a key issue in the case. Unable to afford the $100,000 bail, he remained in jail for 2 months while awaiting his next hearing. During this time, his attorney, Brett Whipple, worked diligently to have Marvin's bail reduced. The defense argued that the initial bail amount was unreasonable and financially out of reach for Marvin, a man supporting a family of 5. In their motion to the court, they requested a more reasonable bail amount and insisted that Marvin posed no flight risk, especially since he had already surrendered his passport. In December 2022, the presiding judge, Diana Sullivan, reviewed the motion to reduce Marvin's bail. During the hearing, Marvin's defense team made several key arguments to support their case. They claimed that the state had presented insufficient evidence to justify the serious charges against Marvin, particularly the lewd conduct and kidnapping accusations. Furthermore, Marvin's family and friends, including his brother and wife Shanara, testified on his behalf, vouching for his character and emphasizing that he was a responsible father and husband. They argued that Marvin had always been present for his children and had shown no signs of dangerous behavior. Despite the serious nature of the allegations, the judge ultimately decided to reduce Marvin's bail from $100,000 to $10,000, a significant decrease. This decision allowed Marvin to post bail and return home under certain conditions. While he was placed on house arrest and required to wear an electronic monitoring device, the reduction in bail opened the door for him to resume his life outside of jail, albeit under close supervision. Additionally, the conditions of his release required that he live separately from Shanara and her children, given the accusations against him involving minors. He was prohibited from coming into contact with anyone under the age of 18, a restriction aimed at protecting his stepchildren and the community at large. This decision would later be seen as a catastrophic failure in the legal system. Though the court imposed monitoring conditions, the reduced bail allowed Marvin the freedom to continue living his life outside of jail, despite the ongoing criminal case against him. Shanara, believing in Marvin's innocence and trusting in their marriage, continued to support him throughout the legal process. However, the decision to release Marvin on such a low bail amount, despite the serious charges, set the stage for the unimaginable tragedy that would unfold months later. In retrospect, the reduction of Marvin's bail from $100,000 to $10,000 would be heavily criticized. Advocates and community members would argue that he should have remained in jail for the safety of his family and others. While his case remained pending, the true extent of the danger he posed was tragically revealed when Marvin returned home and less than a year later committed the horrific crime of killing his family and himself. The decision to reduce his bail ultimately allowed a man facing serious child abuse allegations to return to his home and to the very children he would later harm. After Marvin Patterson's release on a reduced $10,000 bail in December 2022, he was placed under house arrest and fitted with an electronic monitoring device. Despite being charged with serious crimes involving children, he was allowed to return home under the condition that he live separately from Shanara and her children. The court had prohibited him from being near minors, including his stepchildren, to ensure their safety. However, this restriction proved difficult to enforce, as Shanara continued to believe in Marvin's innocence and did not view him as a threat to her family. Financial stress began to mount in the months following Marvin's release. The couple faced significant financial challenges, particularly after their eviction from their rented home in Las Vegas in November 2023. Struggling to keep up with rent payments, Shanara and the children moved back in with Marvin, despite the court's conditions prohibiting him from being around minors. Shanara's belief in Marvin's innocence led her to make this decision, ignoring the legal restrictions meant to protect her family. The financial pressures further escalated as Marvin's car was on the verge of being repossessed, adding to the strain. The family, now back under one roof, was dealing with the emotional and financial burdens of their situation. Marvin's growing frustration with their circumstances likely contributed to his deteriorating mental state. The inability to maintain a stable home, coupled with his pending criminal charges, placed immense pressure on the family, setting the stage for the tragic events that would follow. Marvin's inability to meet these mounting challenges appeared to drive him to a breaking point. His frustration with his personal and financial struggles, compounded by the fear of losing everything, led to a devastating escalation. The decision to return to live with Shanara and the children, despite court orders, would ultimately have fatal consequences. On the night of December 10, 2023, just one day after Shanara Patterson celebrated her 34th birthday, tragedy struck the Patterson household. Marvin Patterson, overwhelmed by a financial strain, his deteriorating mental state, and the weight of his legal troubles, reached a breaking point. In a horrifying act of violence, he turned a gun on his family. Marvin fatally shot his wife, Shanara, and their three children, 14-year-old Keziah, 11-year-old Derek Shemadetberg Jr., known as DJ, and 6-year-old Zemira. After murdering his family, Marvin turned the gun on himself, ending his life in the same apartment where they all lived. The next morning, on December 11, 2023, Marvin's brother, Jason Patterson, became concerned after receiving troubling messages from Marvin. He decided to check on him at his apartment. When Jason arrived, he was met with a nightmare. He found the bloodied bodies of his brother, sister-in-law, and their children. The scene was gruesome and shocking, with all four family members appearing lifeless. In a state of panic, Jason frantically called 911, begging for help. In his 911 call, Jason described the horrifying discovery and mentioned that one of the children, DJ, was still faintly breathing. He pleaded for medical assistance, hoping that his nephew could be saved. Emergency services arrived at the scene, and while Shanara, Keziah, and Zemira were pronounced dead on arrival, DJ was found alive but critically injured. He had suffered severe gunshot wounds but miraculously survived the massacre. DJ was immediately rushed to the University Medical Center, CIRMC in Las Vegas, where doctors worked to stabilize him. Although he survived the physical trauma of the attack, the emotional and psychological scars left by witnessing and experiencing the brutal murders of his family would stay with him forever. DJ's survival became the only glimmer of hope in an otherwise devastating tragedy. In the aftermath of the tragic murders, there was widespread speculation about Marvin Patterson's mental state. Many believed that Marvin had been battling depression and mounting frustration due to the financial strain on his family, the looming repossession of his car, and the eviction from their home. Coupled with the serious legal charges he faced, these stresses likely contributed to his mental breakdown, culminating in the horrific act of violence against his own family. The sudden and brutal nature of the crime shocked both those who knew the Pattersons and the larger Las Vegas community. Public outrage quickly followed, particularly directed at the legal system. The decision to reduce Marvin's bail from $100,000 to $10,000 came under heavy scrutiny. Many criticized the judge who made the decision, arguing that Marvin should have remained in jail, especially given the severity of the charges against him involving child abuse. Activists, community leaders, and legal experts questioned how someone facing such serious accusations could be allowed out on bail, effectively returning to a home where minors were present. Some felt that this decision directly led to the tragic outcome, as it allowed Marvin the opportunity to commit the murders. The funerals of Shanara Patterson and her two daughters, Keziah and Zemira, were heart-wrenching events that drew hundreds from the community. Held at a chapel in Las Vegas, the service was filled with grief, as family, friends, and neighbors gathered to mourn the senseless loss of life. Heartfelt tributes were shared, with loved ones remembering Shanara as a devoted mother and her daughters as bright, loving children with promising futures. The sense of shock and sorrow was palpable as the community struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. DJ, the sole survivor of the attack, faced an uphill battle for recovery. His physical injuries were severe, but the emotional and psychological trauma he endured was equally devastating. DJ, having witnessed the murder of his mother and siblings, was left to grapple with unimaginable pain. In response, family and friends set up a GoFundMe campaign to help cover the costs of DJ's medical care, ongoing therapy, and recovery expenses. At the time of the fundraising efforts, the community rallied around DJ, offering support and donations, though the financial goal had yet to be fully met. As the community mourned the loss of Shanara and her daughters, many called for reforms in the legal system to prevent such tragedies from occurring again. The case sparked deeper conversations about mental health, judicial accountability, and the protective measures in place for families at risk. DJ's survival stood as a small beacon of hope in a dark time, but the path ahead for him and his family would be long and difficult. The tragedy of Shanara Patterson and her children's deaths leaves many lingering questions, particularly whether the murders could have been prevented if Marvin Patterson's bail had remained set at $100,000. Given the serious charges he faced, multiple felonies involving offenses against children, the initial high bail amount was meant to keep him in custody and away from his family, especially his stepchildren. Reducing the bail to $10,000 allowed Marvin to return home, despite restrictions and monitoring conditions that ultimately proved ineffective in protecting the family. Had Marvin remained in jail, it's likely this horrific chain of events would have been avoided. His mental state, compounded by financial stress and legal troubles, deteriorated after his release. The financial burden of trying to maintain a separate residence, combined with the emotional weight of the accusations against him, may have contributed to his fatal decision to take his own life and those of his family. The fact that Marvin was allowed to return to a home where minors lived, despite the restrictions imposed by the court, raises serious questions about the system's ability to protect vulnerable families. Critics argue that if the court had upheld the higher bail amount, Marvin would not have had the opportunity to commit these murders. His incarceration would have kept him away from his wife and children, possibly giving the family time and space to process the situation and seek safety. The failure to recognize the potential danger Marvin posed, despite the serious charges against him, reflects a broader issue within the justice system, balancing individual rights with public safety. Ultimately, while it is impossible to know for certain whether this tragedy could have been completely avoided, keeping Marvin in jail would have drastically reduced the risk of such a devastating outcome. The case serves as a painful reminder of the importance of stricter safeguards when dealing with individuals accused of serious crimes, especially those that involve children and vulnerable family members. The funeral services for Shanara and her daughters were attended by many from the community, reflecting the deep impact the tragedy had on those who knew them. It was a moment of collective mourning as people came together to honor the lives lost and show solidarity with the surviving family. The emotional and financial support offered by the community provided a crucial lifeline for the family in their darkest time, helping them navigate the overwhelming grief and trauma caused by the tragedy. In the face of such an unimaginable loss, the Las Vegas community showed how important collective support can be in helping families like Shanara's begin the long road to healing. Though the wounds left behind may never fully heal, the outpouring of love and assistance helped to ease the burden and provided DJ and his remaining family members with some measure of hope for the future. This case has highlighted flaws in the bail system, prompting demands for reform, including more rigorous evaluations of defendants in serious cases and better enforcement of court restrictions. There are also calls for the judge who reduced Marvin's bail to be held accountable, with advocates pushing for greater transparency and responsibility in judicial decisions to prevent future tragedies. As we come to the end of this heartbreaking story, we invite you to share your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. What do you think could have been done differently in this case? Could stronger legal actions have prevented this tragedy? Your insights and opinions matter, and they may offer valuable perspectives to others who are grappling with similar issues. Let's continue the conversation and raise awareness so that together we can help prevent such tragedies in the future. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more true crime stories.